The scent of cigar smoke and stale whiskey filled Ruby Bennett's nostrils as rough hands shoved her forward into the dim saloon, and she stumbled in her worn calico dress, catching herself against a wooden post before turning to see her stepfather gesturing wildly at a poker table surrounded by 6 hardened men. "Gentlemen, I'm putting up something more valuable than money this round," Harold Bennett announced, his voice slurred from too much drink. "My stepdaughter here. Whoever wins this hand gets her." Ruby's blood turned to ice in her veins. The year was 1882, and she was 21 years old, but her stepfather treated her like property he could dispose of at will. Her mother had died 3 months prior from consumption, and Harold had become increasingly desperate to cover his gambling debts. Still, she never imagined he would sink this low. "You cannot be serious," she said, her voice trembling with equal parts rage and fear. "Shut your mouth, girl," Harold snapped. "You will do as I say." The men at the table exchanged glances. Some looked interested, others uncomfortable. One man in particular, sitting with his back straight and his hat pulled low, remained perfectly still. Ruby could not see his face clearly in the lamplight, but something about his posture suggested he was different from the others. "That is not legal," one of the players objected, a portly man with mutton-chop sideburns. "You cannot wager a human being." "She owes me," Harold said quickly. "Room and board for 21 years. She is working off her debt. Whoever wins can collect that debt instead." Ruby felt sick. The twisted logic made no sense, but in a rough town like Wilcox, Arizona, legality often took a backseat to whatever men with power decided. The saloon owner, a grizzled man named Pete, watched from behind the bar with his arms crossed, making no move to intervene. "I am in," said a man with a scarred face and cruel eyes. Ruby recognized him as Silas Cormac, a cattle rustler with a vicious reputation. 2 other men agreed. The remaining players threw down their cards and walked away, unwilling to participate in such a disgraceful game. That left 4 players: Harold, Silas, a nervous-looking ranch hand named Jimmy, and the quiet man in the hat. "What about you, stranger?" Harold demanded, looking at the silent cowboy. "You in or out?" The man slowly lifted his head, and Ruby caught her first clear look at his face. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features, a straight nose, and eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran along his jawline, and stubble shadowed his face. He looked at Ruby for a long moment, and she saw something in his expression she could not quite identify. "I am in," he said quietly. His voice was deep and steady. "Good," Harold said, rubbing his hands together. "Owen Emerson, right? Heard you are passing through on your way to California." So that was his name, Owen Emerson. Ruby committed it to memory, studying the man who might determine her fate in the next few minutes. The dealer, a saloon employee with slicked back hair, shuffled the cards with practiced efficiency. Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs as he dealt 5 cards to each player. She wanted to run, to flee into the night, but where would she go? She had no money, no horse, no family except the stepfather who was gambling her away like a piece of furniture. The men studied their cards. Harold's face showed his disappointment immediately. He had never been good at hiding his reactions, which was why he lost so often. Silas grinned wickedly, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Jimmy looked ready to be sick. Owen's expression remained completely neutral. The first round of betting began. Jimmy folded almost immediately, pushing back from the table with a mumbled apology. Harold stayed in, throwing down what few coins he had left. Silas raised the bet, adding a gold pocket watch to the pot. Owen matched it with cold hard cash, his movements economical and precise. "Let us see what you have got," the dealer said. Harold laid down his cards first, A pair of threes. He slumped in defeat. Silas spread his hand with a triumphant laugh. 3 jacks, beat that. Ruby's stomach dropped. She would rather die than go with Silas Cormac. She had heard stories about what he did to women, stories that made her skin crawl. Owen set his cards down one at a time. 10, Jack, Queen, King, Ace, all hearts. Royal flush, the dealer announced, his eyebrows rising in surprise. The saloon fell silent. A royal flush was the best possible hand in poker, nearly impossible to get. Silas's face turned purple with rage. "You cheated," he snarled, reaching for his gun. Owen was faster. His hand moved in a blur, and suddenly his revolver was pointed directly at Silas's chest. "I did not cheat," he said calmly. "You saw the dealer shuffle, you saw him deal, I simply got lucky." "Lucky," Silas spat. "Too lucky." "Are you calling me a liar?" Owen's voice dropped to a dangerous tone. The dealer cleared his throat. "I can vouch for the gentleman. I dealt those cards fair and square. He won honestly." Silas glared at Owen for another long moment before slowly removing his hand from his gun. "You may have won tonight, but watch your back, Emerson." "I always do," Owen replied, holstering his weapon. Harold stood up unsteadily, avoiding Ruby's eyes. "Well then, she is yours. Good riddance." He stumbled toward the bar, already calling for another drink. Ruby stood frozen as Owen collected his winnings and rose from the table. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean build of a man who spent his days in the saddle. He walked toward her, and she instinctively took a step back. "Please," she whispered. "Please do not hurt me." He stopped a few feet away, studying her face. Up close, she could see the weariness in his eyes, the kind that came from seeing too much hardship. "What is your full name?" he asked. "Ruby Bennett," she said, her voice barely audible. "Ruby." He said it thoughtfully, as if testing how it sounded. Then he did something that shocked her to her core. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and held it out to her. "Take this." She hesitated before accepting it with shaking fingers. Unfolding the paper, she saw that it was the deed to her debt, signed over by Harold to Owen. Before she could read further, Owen struck a match and held it to the corner of the document. "What are you doing?" she gasped. "Burning it," he said simply, dropping the flaming paper onto the sawdust floor and crushing it under his boot heel. He looked directly into her eyes. "You are not a prize, Ruby Bennett. You are a person, and no person should be owned by another." Ruby stared at him, unable to comprehend what had just happened. "I do not understand." "It is simple," Owen said. "You are free. Go wherever you want, do whatever you want. You do not belong to me or anyone else." Tears sprang to Ruby's eyes. "But I have nowhere to go, no money, nothing." Owen was quiet for a moment, then said, "I am staying at the boarding house on Main Street for the night. Mrs. Patterson runs it. She is a decent woman. I will pay for a room for you and give you enough money to get started somewhere. What you do after that is your choice." "Why would you do this?" Ruby asked, searching his face for some hidden motive. "Why would you help me?" "Because it is the right thing to do," Owen said, "and because nobody deserves to be treated the way you were just treated." Ruby wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." Owen nodded once, then turned toward the door. Ruby followed him out into the cool October night, leaving behind the smoke-filled saloon and the stepfather who had betrayed her. The stars above Wilcox shone bright and clear, and for the first time in months, Ruby felt a small flicker of hope. Mrs. Patterson was indeed a kind woman, gray-haired and round-faced, who asked no questions when Owen paid for a second room and explained that Ruby needed a safe place to stay. She showed Ruby to a small but clean room upstairs, with a real bed, a wash basin, and curtains on the window. "You get some rest now, dear," Mrs. Patterson said gently, patting Ruby's shoulder. "Things always look better in the morning." After the landlady left, Ruby sat on the bed and let the tears flow freely. She cried for her mother, for the life she had lost, for the fear and humiliation of the evening. But she also cried with relief, because Owen Emerson had shown her a kindness she had not expected to find in this harsh world. She did not sleep much that night. Her mind kept replaying the scene in the saloon, the moment when Owen had burned the debt paper and declared her free. Who was he? Where had he come from? And why had he helped her when he could have claimed her for himself? Morning came with golden light streaming through the window. Ruby washed her face and tried to make herself presentable, though her dress was shabby and her hair needed proper brushing. When she ventured downstairs, she found Owen sitting at the dining table eating breakfast. He looked up when she entered. "Good morning," he said. "Sit down, Mrs. Patterson makes excellent biscuits." Ruby sat across from him, acutely aware of how she must look. The landlady bustled in with a plate of food for her: biscuits, eggs, bacon, and coffee. Ruby's stomach growled. She had not eaten since yesterday morning. "Thank you," she said to Mrs. Patterson, then began to eat. The food was delicious and she had to stop herself from wolfing it down. Owen ate in silence for a while, then said, "I have been thinking about your situation. Do you have any skills? Anything you are good at?" Ruby swallowed a bite of biscuit. "I can read and write. My mother taught me. I can sew, cook, clean. I helped her run a boarding house before she got sick." "That is good," Owen said. "A woman with those skills can find work in any town. Mrs. Patterson might even need help here." "Actually, Mrs. Patterson said, overhearing as she refilled their coffee cups, "I could use an extra pair of hands. My arthritis has been bothering me something fierce. If you are interested, Ruby, I can offer you room and board plus a small wage." Ruby looked at the older woman in surprise. Truly, Mrs. Patterson confirmed. "I heard what happened last night. The whole town is talking about it. You seem like a good girl who got dealt a bad hand. I would be happy to help you get back on your feet." "I would be very grateful," Ruby said, feeling the hope inside her grow stronger. Owen nodded approvingly. "That settles it then. I will be heading out this afternoon, but I will leave you some money to tide you over until you get your first wages." "I cannot take your money," Ruby protested. "You have already done so much." "Consider it a loan if that makes you feel better," Owen said. "Pay it forward someday when you are in a position to help someone else." Ruby studied him across the table. In the morning light, she could see details she had missed the night before. His clothes were well made but worn from travel. His hands were calloused from hard work. There was a sadness in his eyes that matched something inside her own soul. "Why were you in that card game last night?" she asked suddenly. "You do not seem like a gambling man." Owen's jaw tightened slightly. "I was killing time before moving on." "I should not have sat down at that table." "But you did," Ruby said, "and I am glad you did." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a connection Ruby could not name. Owen looked away first, taking a sip of his coffee. "Where are you headed?" Ruby asked. "You said California." "That was the plan," Owen said. "I have a cousin in Sacramento who offered me work on his ranch, but plans change." "Why did you leave wherever you came from?" Owen was silent for so long that Ruby thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, "I had a ranch in Texas, near Fort Worth. Lost it when the bank foreclosed. Lost my wife in childbirth 2 years before that." His voice was flat, matter of fact, but Ruby heard the pain underneath. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I lost my mother 3 months ago. I know what it is like to lose someone you love." Owen met her eyes again. "Then you understand why sometimes a man needs to keep moving." "Or a woman," Ruby added. A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. "Or a woman." They finished breakfast in companionable silence. Afterward, Owen went upstairs to pack his things. Ruby helped Mrs. Patterson clear the dishes, her mind churning with conflicting thoughts. She was grateful for the offer of work, grateful for her freedom, but she also felt a strange reluctance at the thought of Owen leaving. When he came back downstairs with his saddlebags over his shoulder, Ruby was sweeping the front porch. He walked over to her and held out a small leather pouch. $20, he said. It should be enough to buy some new clothes and other necessities. Owen, this is too much, Ruby said, but he pressed the pouch into her hand. It is what is right, he insisted. You take care of yourself, Ruby Bennett. Will I ever see you again? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Owen looked at her for a long moment. I do not know, he said honestly. I do not know where I will end up. If you are ever back in Wilcox, Ruby said, you will always have a friend here. I will remember that, Owen said. He tipped his hat to her, then walked down the steps toward the livery stable where he had boarded his horse. Ruby watched him go, feeling an unexpected ache in her chest. She told herself she was being foolish. She barely knew the man. He had helped her out of basic human decency, nothing more. There was no reason to feel this sense of loss. But as she watched his tall figure disappear around the corner, she could not shake the feeling that something important was walking out of her life. The next few weeks passed quickly. Ruby threw herself into her work at the boarding house, determined to prove her worth to Mrs. Patterson. She scrubbed floors, washed linens, cooked meals, and tended to the needs of the various guests who passed through. The work was hard but satisfying, and Mrs. Patterson was a kind employer who treated her more like a granddaughter than a servant. Harold Bennett stayed away, which was a blessing. Ruby heard through town gossip that he had lost everything in another card game and was working odd jobs to pay off his debts. She felt no pity for him. Ruby made friends with some of the other young women in town. There was Sarah, who worked at the general store, and Martha, the schoolteacher. They invited her to church socials and quilting bees, welcoming her into their circle. For the first time since her mother's death, Ruby began to feel like she had a community, but she thought about Owen Emerson often. She would catch herself wondering where he was, whether he had made it to California, whether he was happy. Sometimes, late at night, she would remember the way he had looked at her in the saloon when he said she was not a prize but a person. No one had ever spoken to her with such respect. November arrived, bringing cooler temperatures to the Arizona desert. Ruby used some of the money Owen had given her to buy 2 new dresses and a warm shawl. She saved the rest, determined to build a nest egg for her future. One evening, as she was helping Mrs. Patterson prepare supper, there was a knock at the front door. Ruby went to answer it, wiping her hands on her apron. When she opened the door, her heart nearly stopped. Owen Emerson stood on the porch, hat in hand, looking travel-worn and tired. "Hello, Ruby," he said quietly. "Owen," she breathed. "You came back." "I did," he said. "May I come in?" "Of course." Ruby stepped aside, her pulse racing. "Mrs. Patterson, we have a guest," she called toward the kitchen. The landlady emerged, recognized Owen, and smiled. "Mr. Emerson, welcome back. Will you be needing a room?" "Yes, madam, if you have one available." "Always have room for decent folk," Mrs. Patterson said. "Ruby, show him to room 3 while I finish supper. You will join us, Mr. Emerson." "I would be honored," Owen said. Ruby led him upstairs, acutely aware of his presence behind her. She showed him to the room, the same one he had stayed in before. "Thank you," he said, setting down his saddlebags. "What brought you back to Wilcox?" Ruby asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Owen rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of discomfort. "I made it as far as California, spent a few weeks working with my cousin, but something did not feel right. I kept thinking about unfinished business." What kind of unfinished business? He looked directly at her. The kind that involves a brave young woman who deserved better than what life had given her. I wanted to make sure you were all right. Ruby's cheeks flushed. That was kind of you. As you can see, I am doing well. Mrs. Patterson has been wonderful to me. I am glad, Owen said, and he sounded like he genuinely meant it. You look happier than you did before. I am, Ruby said. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have control over my own life. They stood there for a moment, neither quite knowing what to say next. Finally, Ruby said, I should let you get settled. Supper will be ready soon. Ruby, Owen said as she turned to leave. I am glad I came back. So am I, she admitted, then hurried downstairs before he could see how much his words affected her. Supper that evening was a lively affair. Mrs. Patterson's other guests included a traveling salesman, a young couple on their way to Tucson, and an elderly prospector who told wild stories about his mining days. Owen was quiet but attentive, answering questions about his travels when asked, but mostly listening. Ruby served the food and tried not to stare at him, but she was hyper-aware of his presence. Every time their eyes met, she felt a jolt of electricity. After the meal, Owen helped Ruby clear the dishes, despite her protests that he was a guest. I do not mind helping, he said, carrying plates into the kitchen. I am used to doing for myself. They worked side by side, washing and drying the dishes. The domesticity of it felt natural, comfortable in a way that surprised Ruby. So you did not like California? She asked, scrubbing a pot. It was not that, Owen said. My cousin's ranch is beautiful. Good land, good cattle, but it did not feel like home. What does home feel like? Owen thought about it. I am not sure anymore. I thought Texas was home, but after I lost everything, it stopped feeling that way. Maybe home is not a place. Maybe it is a feeling. Or a person, Ruby suggested quietly. Or a person, Owen agreed. They finished the dishes in silence, but it was a comfortable silence filled with unspoken understanding. Over the next few days, Owen stayed in Wilcox, and he and Ruby spent more time together. He helped her with heavy chores around the boarding house, fixing a broken step and repairing a leaky roof. They took walks in the evening, talking about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Ruby learned that Owen had been raised on a ranch, the youngest of 4 brothers. He had married his childhood sweetheart at 23, full of hope for the future. But she had died giving birth to their stillborn son, and the grief had nearly destroyed him. He had thrown himself into working the ranch, trying to outrun his pain, but when the bank foreclosed due to debts his father had left, Owen had nothing left to hold him there. I have been drifting ever since, he admitted as they sat on a bench outside the boarding house, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Moving from place to place, taking odd jobs, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Are you tired of drifting? Ruby asked. Yes, Owen said simply. I am tired of running from the past. I am tired of being alone. Ruby's heart beat faster. You do not have to be alone. Owen turned to look at her, his gray eyes intense. Ruby, I need to be honest with you. I came back to Wilcox because I could not stop thinking about you. These past weeks, you have been on my mind constantly. I know we barely know each other, and I have no right to presume anything, but I had to see you again. I thought about you too, Ruby confessed. Every single day. When you left, I felt like something was missing. I am not a rich man, Owen said. I have some money saved, but not much. I cannot offer you a fancy life. I do not want a fancy life, Ruby said. I just want a real one, an honest one, with someone who treats me like a person, not property. Owen reached over and took her hand. His palm was rough and warm against hers. You deserve everything good in this world, Ruby Bennett. So do you, Owen Emerson. They sat there holding hands as the sun dipped below the horizon, and Ruby felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was what she had been missing. This connection, this feeling of being seen and valued for who she truly was. "I want to court you properly," Owen said. "If you will allow it, I want to do this right." "I would like that," Ruby said, smiling at him, and so began their courtship. Over the following weeks, Owen found work at a nearby ranch, hired on as a ranch hand. He was good with horses and cattle, and the owner, a gruff but fair man named Tom Jenkins, quickly came to rely on him. Owen saved his wages carefully, planning for the future. He called on Ruby every evening after work, sometimes taking her for rides in a borrowed wagon, other times just sitting with her on the porch and talking. They attended church socials together, and Ruby introduced him to her friends. Sarah and Martha approved of Owen, telling Ruby she had found herself a good man. Mrs. Patterson watched their courtship with approving eyes. "That young man is smitten with you," she told Ruby one day while they were baking bread. "And you are smitten right back. Is it that obvious?" Ruby asked, feeling her cheeks heat. "As obvious as the sun in the sky," Mrs. Patterson said with a chuckle. "And I am happy for you, dear. After what you have been through, you deserve some happiness." "He makes me feel safe," Ruby said, "and cherished, like I matter." "That is what love should feel like," the older woman said wisely. Love. Ruby turned the word over in her mind. Was that what this was? This warmth that filled her chest whenever Owen was near? This ache when they were apart? This desire to know everything about him, to share everything with him? Yes, she realized. This was love. One December evening, as they sat by the fireplace in the boarding house parlor, Owen took Ruby's hand and said, "I love you, Ruby Bennett. I know it has only been a couple of months, but I am certain of my feelings. You have brought light back into my life." Ruby's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Owen. I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone." Owen pulled her close and kissed her gently. It was Ruby's first kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more. Sweet and tender, full of promise. When they broke apart, Owen said, "I want to marry you, but I want to do it right. I want to have something to offer you first, a home, a future." "We can build that together," Ruby said. "You do not have to do it alone." "I know," Owen said, "but give me a little time. Let me save up enough money to buy some land. Tom Jenkins says there is a property for sale not far from his ranch. Good grazing land with a creek running through it. If I keep working and saving, I could afford it by spring." "I will wait," Ruby promised. "I would wait forever for you." "It will not be forever," Owen assured her. "Just a few months." Winter settled over Wilcox, bringing chilly nights and the occasional frost. Ruby and Owen's love deepened as they navigated the challenges of building a life together. Owen worked long hours at the Jenkins ranch, often coming to see Ruby exhausted but always with a smile for her. Ruby continued her work at the boarding house, saving her own wages to contribute to their future. They made plans for their wedding, for the house they would build, for the life they would create. Ruby had never been happier. But happiness, Ruby was learning, was often tested. In January, Harold Bennett showed up drunk at the boarding house, demanding to see Ruby. Mrs. Patterson tried to turn him away, but he pushed past her, shouting Ruby's name. Ruby came downstairs, her heart sinking when she saw him. "What do you want, Harold?" "I want what is owed to me," he slurred. "You are my stepdaughter. You owe me respect. You owe me support." "I owe you nothing," Ruby said firmly. "You gambled me away in a card game. You gave up any claim to me that night." "That game was not legal," Harold argued. "You still belong under my roof." "I never belonged to you," Ruby said, "and I am not going anywhere with you." "We will see about that," Harold snarled, lunging toward her. But he never reached her. Owen, who had been fixing the fence out back and heard the commotion, appeared in the doorway. He grabbed Harold by the collar and hauled him backward. "Touch her and you will regret it," Owen said, his voice deadly calm. Harold struggled, but Owen was stronger and sober. "She is my stepdaughter," Harold protested. "She is a grown woman who wants nothing to do with you," Owen said. "Now get out of here before I throw you out." "This is not over," Harold threatened. "Yes, it is," Owen said. "If you come near Ruby again, you will answer to me, and trust me, you do not want that." He released Harold with a shove. The older man stumbled, caught himself, and shot them all a venomous look before staggering out the door. Ruby was shaking. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "It is all right," he murmured. "He is gone. I will not let him hurt you." "Thank you," Ruby whispered against his chest. "Thank you." Mrs. Patterson appeared with a glass of water. "Here, dear, sit down and catch your breath." "That man is a menace." "I should have gone to the sheriff," Ruby said, "had him warned to stay away." "I will go tomorrow," Owen said. "Make it official. He will not bother you again." True to his word, Owen visited the sheriff the next day. The lawman, a no-nonsense man named Bill Carter, agreed to have a talk with Harold. Whether the conversation helped or whether Harold simply gave up, Ruby never knew, but he did not return to the boarding house again. As winter turned to spring, Owen's dream of buying land became a reality. Tom Jenkins helped him negotiate a fair price for 60 acres of good grazing land with a creek and a small grove of cottonwood trees. It was not much, but it was theirs, a foundation to build on. "I can start building a house now," Owen told Ruby excitedly. "It will not be fancy, but it will be solid. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a proper sitting room, a place we can make into a home." "When can we marry?" Ruby asked. "As soon as the house is livable," Owen said. "I am thinking June. That gives me 3 months to get it built." "I can help," Ruby offered. "I am not afraid of hard work." "I know you are not," Owen said, kissing her forehead. "But you also have your job with Mrs. Patterson. Let me do this. Let me build a home for us." Ruby agreed, though she visited the property often, bringing Owen lunch and watching the house take shape. He worked on it every spare moment, sometimes by lamplight after his regular work was done. Tom Jenkins and some of the other ranch hands pitched in on their days off, and slowly but surely, walls rose, a roof went on, and a house emerged from the Arizona earth. It was simple but beautiful, built from local timber and stone. Owen installed glass windows he ordered from Tucson, and Ruby sewed curtains from fabric she bought at the general store. They picked out furniture together, simple pieces from the local carpenter, and Ruby spent her evenings embroidering linens for their home. By early June, the house was ready. It smelled of fresh wood and new beginnings. Owen carried Ruby over the threshold one afternoon, both of them laughing, practicing for their wedding day. "What do you think?" he asked, setting her down in the middle of the sitting room. "It is perfect," Ruby said, looking around at the sun-filled space. "It is more than I ever dreamed of." "You deserve even more," Owen said. "But this is a start." They set their wedding date for June 15th, a Saturday. The ceremony would be simple, held at the church in Wilcox with Reverend Thompson officiating. Mrs. Patterson insisted on hosting a reception at the boarding house afterward. Ruby wore a dress she made herself, white cotton with lace trim, simple but elegant. Martha helped her arrange her hair, pinning it up with small white flowers. When Ruby looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the frightened, broken girl who had been gambled away in a card game 8 months ago. That girl was gone, replaced by a confident young woman about to marry the man she loved. The church was full of well-wishers. Sarah and Martha were there, along with Mrs. Patterson, Tom Jenkins and his wife, many of the ranch hands Owen worked with, and various townspeople who had come to know and respect the couple. Even Sheriff Carter attended, giving Owen a nod of approval. Owen waited at the altar in his best suit, his gray eyes fixed on the door. When Ruby entered on Mrs. Patterson's arm, the older woman had volunteered to give her away. His face transformed with joy. They exchanged vows in front of God and witnesses, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Ruby with such tenderness that several of the ladies in attendance wiped tears from their eyes. The reception was a joyful celebration. Mrs. Patterson had outdone herself with food, and there was music and dancing. Ruby had never felt so happy, so loved, so complete. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Owen and Ruby slipped away to their new home. Owen carried her over the threshold again, this time as his wife, and Ruby laughed with pure happiness. Their first night as husband and wife was everything Ruby had hoped for. Owen was gentle and patient, mindful that Ruby was inexperienced. He made her feel cherished and beautiful, whispering words of love as they came together. Afterward, lying in his arms in their own bed in their own home, Ruby felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks. "Are you all right?" Owen asked, concerned. "I am more than all right," Ruby said. "I am happy, so incredibly happy." "So am I," Owen said, holding her close. "I never thought I would feel this way again after losing my first wife, but you have given me a reason to hope, to dream, to live again." "We saved each other," Ruby said softly. "Yes," Owen agreed. "I think we did." Life as a married couple had its challenges, but Ruby and Owen faced them together. They worked hard to make their small ranch successful. Owen bought a few head of cattle and some chickens. Ruby planted a vegetable garden and learned to make butter and cheese. Money was tight, but they had everything that mattered: each other. They became active members of the Wilcox community. Owen helped neighboring ranchers with various tasks, earning their respect and friendship. Ruby joined the church ladies' auxiliary and helped organize social events. They were building not just a home but a life, connected to the land and the people around them. In October, nearly a year after the fateful card game, Ruby realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she tried not to get her hopes up, but as the weeks passed and other symptoms appeared, she became certain. She was with child. She told Owen one evening after supper. He stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable, and Ruby felt a flutter of fear. She knew about his first wife, about the baby they had lost. Then Owen's face crumpled and tears streamed down his cheeks. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Ruby asked uncertainly. "Happy." Owen laughed through his tears, pulling her into his arms. "Ruby, I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. Yes, I am happy. So incredibly happy." They held each other and cried together, mourning the losses of their pasts while celebrating the hope of their future. Ruby's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Owen was attentive and protective, sometimes overly so, but Ruby understood his fear. She stayed healthy and active, continuing to do light chores around the ranch while Owen handled the heavier work. In May of 1883, as spring flowers bloomed across the Arizona desert, Ruby went into labor. Mrs. Patterson and the town midwife, a capable woman named Helen, attended her. Owen paced outside the bedroom wearing a path in the floorboards. The labor was long and difficult, but Ruby was strong. Just after dawn, a baby's cry filled the house. Helen opened the door and called to Owen, "You can come in now." Owen burst into the room, his face pale with fear and hope. Ruby lay exhausted against the pillows, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she was smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle. "A son," she said softly. "We have a son." Owen approached slowly as if in a dream. He looked down at the tiny red face, the miniature fingers curled into fists, and his expression was one of wonder. "A son," he repeated. "He is perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Ruby asked. With shaking hands, Owen took the baby. He stared down at his son, and Ruby saw the moment when hope overcame fear, when the present triumphed over the past. "Hello, little one," Owen whispered. "I am your father, and I promise to love you and protect you for the rest of my life." They named him Oliver Jacob Emerson, after Owen's father and Ruby's maternal grandfather. Oliver was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and an appetite to match. Owen doted on him, and Ruby fell completely in love with motherhood despite the exhaustion and challenges. Life settled into a new rhythm. Owen continued to build up the ranch, and Ruby managed the house and cared for Oliver. They were tired but happy, finding joy in the simple moments. Oliver's first smile, his first laugh, the way he reached for Owen when his father came in from working. When Oliver was 6 months old, Owen came home one evening with news. "Tom Jenkins is selling off some of his land," he said. "He is getting older and wants to downsize. He offered to sell me 40 additional acres at a good price. With that land added to ours, we would have a real working ranch." "Can we afford it?" Ruby asked. "If we are careful," Owen said. "And if we take out a small loan from the bank, but I think we can make it work. This could be our future, Ruby. A real legacy to pass down to Oliver and any other children we have." Ruby smiled at the thought of more children. "Then let us do it." They purchased the additional land, and the ranch flourished. Owen hired a young ranch hand named Peter to help with the increased workload. Ruby sold eggs and vegetables in town, adding to their income. Slowly but surely, they were building something lasting. 2 years passed in hard work and happiness. Oliver grew into a curious, energetic toddler who followed Owen around like a shadow. Ruby became pregnant again, and in the spring of 1885, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Helen Emerson, after Ruby's middle name and the midwife who had helped deliver Oliver. Their family was complete, and their home was filled with love and laughter. Owen would sometimes look around at his wife, his children, and his land, and shake his head in amazement at how much his life had changed. "What are you thinking?" Ruby asked him one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Oliver chase fireflies while Rose slept in Ruby's arms. "I am thinking about that night in the saloon," Owen said. "How I almost did not sit down at that card game, how different everything would be if I had walked away." "But you did not walk away," Ruby said. "You stayed and you won and you set me free." "We set each other free," Owen corrected. "You gave me a reason to stop running, to build a life again. You brought me back to life, Ruby. And you gave me hope when I had none," Ruby said. "You showed me that I was worth more than how others treated me." Owen leaned over and kissed her gently. "You are worth everything." As the years passed, the Emerson Ranch became one of the most respected in the area. Owen's reputation for fairness and hard work made him a leader in the community. Ruby's kindness and generosity made her beloved by everyone who knew her. Their children grew up healthy and happy, learning the values of honesty, compassion, and hard work from their parents. Oliver inherited his father's love of ranching and his mother's gentle spirit. Rose was spirited and curious, always asking questions and exploring the world around her. They were the center of Ruby and Owen's universe. When Oliver turned 10, Owen began teaching him the skills he would need to eventually take over the ranch. They spent hours together mending fences, tending cattle, and talking about everything from ranching to life to values. Ruby watched them together and felt her heart swell with love and pride. Rose, at 8 years old, showed a talent for drawing and painting. Ruby encouraged her daughter's artistic inclinations, buying her paper and pencils from the general store. Rose would sit for hours, sketching the desert landscape, the horses, her family. In the evenings, the family would gather in the sitting room. Owen would read aloud from books they ordered from catalogs, everything from adventure stories to history. Ruby would sew or knit while listening. The children would do their schoolwork or draw, the whole family together in comfortable companionship. These were the moments Ruby treasured most. Not the big events or achievements, but the quiet, everyday moments that made up a life. The sound of Owen's voice reading a story. Oliver's laughter at something his father said. Rose humming to herself as she drew. The crackle of the fire in the hearth. The sense of safety and belonging. One evening, when the children were in bed and Ruby and Owen sat together on the porch watching the stars, Ruby said, "Do you remember what you told me that night in the saloon? That I was not a prize but a person?" "Of course I remember," Owen said. "Those words changed my life," Ruby said. "They made me realize that I had value beyond what others assigned to me, that I deserved to be treated with respect and dignity." "You always deserved that," Owen said. "I just reminded you of it." "You did more than remind me," Ruby said. "You showed me what love could be. Real love, the kind that builds up rather than tears down, the kind that sees the other person as an equal partner, not property or possession." Owen took her hand. "You showed me that too. After losing my first wife, I thought I could never love again. But you taught me that the heart has an infinite capacity for love if we are brave enough to open it." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, looking out over the land they had built together. The desert night was peaceful, with crickets singing and a cool breeze rustling the cottonwood leaves. "You ever think about that night?" Ruby asked. "About how differently things could have turned out, sometimes," Owen admitted. "If Silas Cormac had won that hand, or if your stepfather had not gambled you away at all, or if I had not been in that saloon that particular evening. So many small choices that led to this moment. I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Ruby said. "That some force in the universe wanted us to be together." "Maybe," Owen said. "Or maybe we just got very lucky." "I think it was both," Ruby decided. As the years continued to pass, Ruby and Owen grew older together, their love deepening with time. They faced challenges, as all families do. A drought one year that killed several head of cattle. An illness that swept through the area, though thankfully their family was spared the worst of it. The normal conflicts and struggles of raising children and running a ranch. But through it all, they had each other. When times were hard, they leaned on each other. When times were good, they celebrated together. They built a partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and abiding love. Oliver grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like his father, with his mother's compassionate nature. At 18, he began courting a neighbor girl named Emma, and Ruby and Owen watched with knowing smiles, remembering their own courtship. Rose, at 16, was preparing to attend a teaching college in Tucson. She wanted to be a teacher and an artist, to make a difference in the world. Ruby supported her daughter's ambitions, proud that Rose had the opportunities that she herself had never had. One evening, as Ruby and Owen sat on their porch watching another Arizona sunset, Owen said, "We have built a good life." "We have," Ruby agreed. She was 51 now, with threads of silver in her dark hair, but she felt more beautiful than she ever had as a young woman. She was loved, and she knew it down to her bones. "I would not change a single moment," Owen said. "Even the hard times brought us to where we are now." "Even that night in the saloon?" Ruby asked with a smile. "Especially that night in the saloon," Owen said. "That night gave me you." Ruby leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. This land, this home, this life they had built together out of pain and hope and love, it was more than either of them had dared to dream that fateful night 32 years ago. "I love you, Owen Emerson," Ruby said. "I love you, Ruby Emerson," Owen replied. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in peaceful contentment, grateful for every moment that had led them to this place, to each other, to home. The following years brought more joy and growth to the Emerson family. Oliver married Emma in a beautiful ceremony at the Wilcox Church, the same place where Owen and Ruby had exchanged their own vows so many years before. The young couple built a small house on the far corner of the ranch property, planning to eventually take over the operation when Owen and Ruby were ready to step back. Rose graduated from teaching college and returned to Wilcox to teach at the local school. She brought with her a passion for education and art that inspired her students. She also brought home a young man named David, a fellow teacher she had met in Tucson. Owen was skeptical at first, protective of his daughter, but David won him over with his sincerity and dedication to Rose. Ruby watched her children build their own lives and families, and she felt a deep satisfaction. She and Owen had broken the cycle of pain and neglect that had marked their early years. They had created a legacy of love and respect that would continue through generations. Emma gave birth to a son, making Ruby and Owen grandparents for the first time. They named the boy Thomas Owen Emerson, and Ruby cried tears of joy when she held him for the first time. Owen, now in his 60s but still strong and capable, looked at his grandson with the same wonder he had shown when holding Oliver for the first time. "Another generation," he said softly. "Another Emerson to carry on the family name and the ranch. And to be loved," Ruby added. "That is the most important legacy, that they know they are loved." Rose married David a year later, and they settled in Wilcox as well, teaching at the school and contributing to the community. Rose continued her art, and her paintings began to sell in Tucson and even as far as Santa Fe. She never forgot where she came from, though, always returning to the ranch for Sunday dinners and family gatherings. As Owen and Ruby entered their later years, they gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Oliver and Emma. Owen still rode out most days to check on the cattle and mend fences, unwilling to give up the work that had defined so much of his life. But he moved slower now, and Ruby worried about him. "You do not have to prove anything," she told him one morning as he prepared to ride out. "Oliver can handle things." "I know he can," Owen said. "But this ranch, this land, it is a part of me. As long as I can still sit a horse, I will ride out to check on it." Ruby understood. The ranch represented everything they had built together, all the dreams and hard work and sacrifice. It was not just land and cattle. It was their life's work, their testament to what two people could create when they loved and supported each other. Mrs. Patterson had passed away years earlier, leaving the boarding house to a niece. But Ruby still thought of the kind woman often, grateful for the safe haven she had provided at a time when Ruby had nothing and no one. Ruby made a point to help others in need when she could, passing forward the kindness that had been shown to her. One crisp October morning, Ruby woke to find Owen already up and dressed. "Where are you going so early?" she asked. "I want to ride up to the north pasture," he said. "The aspens should be turning by now, and I want to see them." "I will come with you," Ruby said, getting out of bed. They rode together through the ranch lands as the sun rose, painting everything gold. The aspens were indeed turning, their leaves bright yellow against the blue sky. They stopped on a rise overlooking their property, and Ruby caught her breath at the beauty of it. "Do you remember the first time I brought you out here?" Owen asked. When the house was just a frame and a dream, I remember, Ruby said. I remember thinking that I could not believe this was going to be my home. Our home, Owen corrected gently. Our home, Ruby agreed. They sat on their horses side by side, looking out over everything they had built. The house, now expanded and improved over the years. The barn and outbuildings. The corrals with good horses. The pastures with healthy cattle. The vegetable garden that Ruby still tended. The cottonwood trees that had grown tall and strong. But more than the physical structures, Ruby saw the life they had created. The family dinners and celebrations. The quiet evenings on the porch. The laughter of children and grandchildren. The hard work and the rewards it brought. The love that had grown and deepened over nearly 4 decades. We did good, did we not? Owen asked, as if reading her thoughts. We did very good, Ruby confirmed. We took broken pieces and built something beautiful. Owen reached over and took her hand, his weathered fingers intertwining with hers. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for taking a chance on a drifting cowboy with a broken heart. Thank you for seeing me as a person when no one else did, Ruby replied. Thank you for giving me a life worth living. They rode back to the house as the morning sun climbed higher, their shadows long on the ground. Ruby thought about how far they had come from that horrible night in the saloon. She thought about the scared, desperate girl she had been, and the confident, loved woman she had become. She thought about Owen's transformation from a grief-stricken drifter to a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. Love had done that. Love had healed them both and given them a future they could never have imagined. Over the next few years, as they moved into their 70s, Owen and Ruby settled into a comfortable retirement. They still lived on the ranch, but Oliver had taken over the day-to-day operations. They spent their time with their grandchildren, now numbering 5, teaching them about the ranch and the history of their family. Ruby loved telling the grandchildren stories, though she edited out some of the harsher details of her early life. She wanted them to understand that people could overcome difficult circumstances, that love and determination could transform lives, but she did not want to burden them with nightmares. Owen, for his part, taught the grandchildren practical skills. How to ride a horse, how to rope a calf, how to read the weather and the land. But he also taught them values: honesty, hard work, compassion, respect for others. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family threw a large celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from all over the area. There was food and music and dancing, just like at their wedding reception so many years ago. As Ruby and Owen danced together under the stars, their children and grandchildren watching, Ruby felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for the good times, but for all of it, the struggles and the triumphs, because all of it had led to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, the same question he had asked her countless times over the years. "I am thinking about how much I love you," Ruby said. "And how grateful I am for every single day we have had together. Even the hard days," Owen teased gently. "Especially the hard days," Ruby said, "because we faced them together and that made all the difference." As they continued to age, their health began to decline, as is natural for people in their later years. Owen developed arthritis that made riding painful, though he refused to give it up entirely. Ruby's eyesight weakened, making her intricate needlework difficult. But they adapted, finding new ways to contribute and stay active. They spent more time on the porch, watching the world go by, holding hands and reminiscing. They talked about their life together, the memories that made up nearly 5 decades of marriage. They laughed at the funny moments and cried over the sad ones, but mostly they marveled at how blessed they had been. One evening as they sat watching the sunset, Ruby said, "Owen, I want you to know something. If I could go back and change that night in the saloon, I would not. Even knowing how afraid I was, even knowing the pain that led to that moment, I would not change it, because it brought me to you." Owen squeezed her hand. "I feel the same way. All the pain, all the loss, all the wandering, it was worth it to find you." "We saved each other," Ruby said, echoing words she had spoken so long ago. "Yes," Owen agreed. "We saved each other." They continued to sit together as the stars emerged, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of love and meaning. The desert night was peaceful, and Ruby felt a deep contentment settle over her. Whatever time they had left, whether it was years or months or days, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1922, at the age of 87. He had spent the previous day doing what he loved most, riding through the ranch with Oliver and his eldest grandson, checking on the cattle and enjoying the winter sunshine. That evening, he and Ruby had sat on the porch despite the chill, wrapped in blankets and talking about the old days. He had kissed her good night and told her he loved her, the same words he had said every night for 43 years. Ruby found him in the morning, lying peacefully in their bed, his weathered face relaxed. Though her heart broke, she was grateful that he had died as he had lived in recent years, surrounded by the land he loved and the family he adored, with no prolonged suffering. The funeral was attended by what seemed like the entire town of Wilcox and the surrounding areas. Owen had been a respected member of the community for over 40 years, known for his integrity, his hard work, and his kindness. But it was Ruby's eulogy that people would remember. She stood at the front of the church, her children and grandchildren surrounding her, and spoke from the heart. "My husband Owen was the best man I have ever known," she said, her voice strong despite her grief. "He taught me what love truly means. Not possession or control, but respect and partnership. Not grand gestures, but daily acts of kindness and support. He saw me as a person when others saw me as property. He gave me freedom and chose me every day, and I chose him. We built a life together based on mutual respect and abiding love, and that life blessed not just us but our children and grandchildren. Owen's legacy is not just this ranch or his good name. It is the love he planted in the hearts of everyone who knew him, and that love will continue to grow long after his passing." There was not a dry eye in the church when she finished. Ruby lived for 3 more years after Owen's death. She remained on the ranch, cared for by her children and visited constantly by her grandchildren, who now numbered 8. She spent her days sitting on the porch she and Owen had shared, watching the land they had built together, remembering. She thought often about that night in the saloon, the night that had changed everything. She thought about the young woman she had been, terrified and humiliated, believing she had no value. She thought about the cowboy who had won her in a card game and declared she was not a prize but a person, setting her free and, in doing so, capturing her heart. She thought about the life they had built together, the love that had sustained them through hardships and blessed them with joy. She thought about her children and grandchildren, the legacy of that love continuing into future generations. On a warm spring evening in 1925, as the wildflowers bloomed across the Arizona desert, Ruby sat on the porch and watched the sunset one last time. She was 84 years old and she was tired, but she was not afraid. She had lived a full, rich life, had loved and been loved in return, had made a difference in the world. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to emerge, Ruby closed her eyes and let herself drift away. And in her last moments, she felt Owen's hand take hers, heard his voice whisper that he loved her, and she smiled. Ruby Bennett Emerson passed peacefully that evening, surrounded by the beauty of the land she and Owen had made their home. Her children found her in the morning, a peaceful expression on her face, and they knew she had gone to be with the man she had loved for nearly 5 decades. At Ruby's funeral, Rose read a letter her mother had written, to be opened after her death. In it, Ruby had written to her children and grandchildren about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect, of building lives based on love rather than fear or possession, of never giving up even when circumstances seemed hopeless. She wrote about how Owen had saved her life by seeing her as a person of value, and how that simple act had transformed everything. "Love is the most powerful force in the world," Ruby had written. "It can heal the deepest wounds, bridge the widest gaps, and transform the darkest nights into the brightest days. Your grandfather taught me that, and together we built a life that proved it. Carry that forward. Love boldly, treat others with respect, and know that you are cherished beyond measure. This is my legacy to you, along with the land and the family name. Love without condition, live without regret, and remember always that every person you meet has inherent worth and dignity. Never forget that." Ruby was buried next to Owen on a hillside overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together 40 years earlier. Oliver and Emma continued to run the ranch, passing it eventually to their own children. Rose's children became teachers and artists, spreading beauty and knowledge throughout the community. And all of them, every generation that came after, carried within them the legacy of Ruby and Owen's love. The story of how Owen won Ruby in a card game and set her free became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a reminder that love is not about ownership or possession, but about seeing the humanity in others and honoring it. It was a reminder that broken people can heal each other, that hope can emerge from despair, and that a single act of kindness can echo through generations. The old ranch house still stands, maintained by Owen and Ruby's descendants. The porch where they sat so many evenings still offers a view of the Arizona desert, now protected land that will never be developed. Visitors sometimes stop to see the historic Emerson Ranch, to hear the stories of the family that built it. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sets over the desert and the stars emerge bright and clear, some say you can still feel the presence of Owen and Ruby on that porch, hands clasped together, their love a permanent part of the land they made their home. Their story is a testament to the transformative power of seeing others, truly seeing them as people of value. It is a story of redemption and hope, of love that overcomes all obstacles, of two broken souls who found each other and built something beautiful. From a card game in a smoky saloon to a legacy that spans generations, Owen and Ruby proved that it is never too late to start over, never too late to choose love, and never too late to build the life you deserve. They showed that respect and dignity are the foundations of true love, and that when two people commit to building each other up rather than tearing each other down, there is no limit to what they can achieve together. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the land today, carrying forward the values Owen and Ruby instilled. They treat their employees with respect, contribute to their community, and maintain the family tradition of helping those in need. The Emerson name is still respected throughout Arizona, not because of wealth or fame, but because of the integrity and love that have defined the family for over a century. And it all started with a cowboy who looked at a frightened young woman and saw not a prize to be claimed, but a person to be honored. It started with a simple declaration that changed 2 lives and echoed through time. You are not a prize. You are a person. Those 7 words contained the seed of everything that followed. A love story that proved that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply recognize the humanity in others and treat them accordingly. Ruby and Owen's story reminds us that we all have the power to change lives through our choices, our words, and our actions. Their legacy lives on, not just in their descendants, but in everyone who hears their story and is inspired to treat others with greater dignity, respect, and love.